My name is Nathan Bridgewater, and for 38 years I believed I was the middle child of a struggling factory worker. I thought I knew exactly who I was: the son who sent money home every month, the brother who showed up for every holiday dinner, the man who held his mother's hand through 6 months of chemotherapy. But on a rainy Tuesday in March, everything I knew about myself turned out to be a lie. My mother, Dorothy, was dying in Cleveland General Hospital, her body finally surrendering to the cancer that had eaten away at her for months. The monitors beeped steadily as my brother Dennis stood by the window, checking his phone every few minutes. My sister Marlene sat in the corner, filing her nails like this was just another Tuesday. They'd always been different from me, harder somehow, but I figured that's just how families were. Dorothy's eyes suddenly snapped open with a clarity I hadn't seen in weeks. Her fingers, cold and thin as bird bones, wrapped around my wrist with surprising strength. She pulled me close, so close I could smell the antiseptic and decay on her breath. "Nathan," she whispered, her voice cracking like dried leaves. "I need to tell you something before I go. You're not my son." I thought the morphine was talking. I tried to pull back, to call for a nurse, but her grip tightened. "Listen to me," she said, louder now, loud enough that Dennis looked up from his phone and Marlene stopped filing her nails. "I stole you from a billionaire's family in 1985. Your real name is Christopher Rothwell. Your father owns half of Manhattan." The room went completely silent, except for the heart monitor, which began beeping faster. Dorothy's eyes rolled back, her grip loosened, and within 20 minutes she was gone. The last words my mother ever spoke were a confession that I was never her son at all. Dennis was the first to react. He crossed the room in 3 quick steps and shoved me hard against the wall. "I always knew something was wrong with you," he said, his mechanic's hands leaving grease stains on my collar. 38 years of pretending to be our brother, and you didn't even know it. Marlene stood up slowly, her grocery store name tag still pinned to her shirt from her morning shift. "No wonder Mom looked at you different," she said, her voice cold and sharp. "It wasn't love, it was guilt, pure guilt for what she'd done." They threw me out of the hospital before Dorothy's body was even cold. Dennis grabbed my wallet from my pocket and took the $300 I'd brought for funeral expenses. "Consider it payment for 38 years of freeloading, you bastard," he said, laughing as security escorted me out. "Good riddance to fake family." I spent the next 3 months living in the Burke Lakefront homeless shelter, working day labor when I could find it, trying to understand how my entire life had been built on a kidnapping. I had no identity documents, no family, no proof I was anyone at all. Nathan Bridgewater was the son of a woman who'd stolen a baby. Christopher Rothwell was a ghost who'd been missing for nearly 40 years. Then, yesterday afternoon, 2 men in expensive suits found me in the shelter's food line. Roger Blackstone introduced himself as a private investigator. Anthony Corvell said he was an estate attorney. They'd been searching for me since my mother's deathbed confession had made a small news item in the local paper. "Your biological father is Sterling Rothwell," Blackstone said, showing me a DNA test they'd run from a coffee cup I'd thrown away. "He owns 43 commercial properties in Manhattan, valued at $2.4 billion. He's been searching for you since 1985. He never believed you were dead." Corvell opened his briefcase and pulled out a will. My name, my real name, Christopher Sterling Rothwell III, was the only beneficiary listed. "Your father is dying," he said. "He has maybe 2 weeks left. He wants to see his son before he goes." But then Blackstone leaned forward and spoke 7 words that made my blood run cold, 7 words that explained everything and nothing all at once. Dorothy Bridgewater was Sterling's biological sister. My kidnapper wasn't just a desperate woman who'd stolen a baby. She was my aunt, my father's own sister, who'd raised me as her son while watching her brother build an empire she believed should have been hers. The family I'd lost had never been my family. The family I'd never known had been searching for me my entire life. and the woman I'd called Mom had orchestrated the cruelest deception imaginable, one that spanned 38 years and destroyed multiple lives. I stood there in that homeless shelter, wearing the same clothes I'd worn for 3 days, holding documents that said I was worth billions, learning that my entire existence had been a lie wrapped inside a crime, wrapped inside a family betrayal that went back generations. The rain that had started the day Dorothy died was still falling, and I realized it might never really stop. Growing up in Cleveland's industrial district meant waking up to factory whistles instead of birds, breathing air that tasted like metal, and watching your parents age 10 years for every 5 that passed. Our duplex on Stockton Avenue sat between 2 abandoned warehouses, the kind of place where delivery drivers double-check their locks and pizza places stop delivering after dark. But it was home, and for 38 years, I thought I understood exactly what that meant. My father, Harold Bridgewater, was built like a refrigerator, 6'3" with hands that could palm a basketball or torque a rusted bolt that hadn't moved in decades. He worked double shifts at the Cleveland steel processing plant, coming home at midnight covered in a film of metallic dust that never quite washed off. "Hard work makes an honest man," he'd tell me, ruffling my hair with those massive hands. "Remember that, Nathan. We might not have much, but what we have, we earned." Harold died when I was 15. A crane cable snapped during a routine lift, and 2 tons of steel beam came down wrong. The company sent us a check for $20,000 and a letter saying they weren't liable. Dorothy aged a decade overnight, her brown hair going gray at the temples, her shoulders taking on a permanent hunch as she sat at our kitchen table, calculating how to stretch that money and Harold's meager life insurance to raise 3 kids alone. Dennis was 18 then, already working part-time at Kowalski's Auto Repair. He had Harold's build and Harold's temperament, quick to anger, slow to forgive. He dropped out of senior year the day after the funeral. "Man of the house now," he announced, though what that meant was drinking Harold's leftover Budweiser and yelling at me for reading too much. "Books won't put food on the table, college boy," he'd sneer, even though I'd never mentioned college. It wasn't an option for kids like us. Marlene was 12, all knobby knees and attitude, already learning that the world didn't give you anything for free. She'd count the money in Dorothy's purse when she thought no one was looking, calculating what we could afford for dinner. She started working under the table at 14, bagging groceries at Petrosky's Market, lying about her age with such conviction that even I almost believed she was 16. But I was different, and everyone knew it. Where Dennis and Marlene had Harold's dark brown eyes and thick features, I had green eyes that Dorothy said came from somewhere back in the family line. My hair was lighter, my build leaner. I could add numbers in my head faster than Dennis could punch them into a calculator. When the electric company made an error on our bill, I was the one who caught it. Saved us $80 we didn't have to spare. "Nathan's the smart one," Dorothy would say, but she'd never look at me when she said it. She'd stare at a point just past my shoulder, like she was seeing someone else entirely. After she'd had wine, which became more frequent after Harold died, she'd sometimes touch my face with trembling fingers. "You look just like," she'd start, then catch herself. "Like your grandfather, my father." He had those same eyes. I became the family accountant by default. Every Sunday, I'd sit at our scratched kitchen table with Dorothy's checkbook, figuring out which bills to pay now, which to delay, which creditors to call with promises we might not keep. Dennis resented it, said I was acting superior. Marlene called me Mom's favorite, but there was no warmth in how Dorothy treated me. If anything, there was a careful distance, like I was a piece of china she was afraid to break. After high school, I got a job at the Thurman Distribution Center, working my way up from loader to warehouse supervisor over 15 years. The pay wasn't much, but it was steady. I sent money home every month, $500, that Dorothy would accept with that same distant look. "You're a good son," she'd say, the words sounding rehearsed, like lines from a play she'd performed too many times. When Dorothy got sick, the pancreatic cancer appearing like a sudden storm, I was the one who took time off work to drive her to appointments. Dennis said he couldn't leave the shop. Marlene had been promoted to shift manager at the grocery store and claimed she couldn't risk the position. So I sat in waiting rooms that smelled like disinfectant and fear, holding Dorothy's hand while poison dripped into her veins, hoping it would kill the cancer before it killed her. The morning she died, we'd gathered at Cleveland General because the doctors said it would be soon. Dennis complained about missing work. Marlene scrolled through her phone, occasionally looking up to ask how much longer this would take. I sat beside Dorothy's bed, watching her chest rise and fall, wondering why I felt like I was losing someone I'd never really known at all. Looking back now, I realize I was right. I never knew Dorothy Bridgewater, not really, and she'd made sure I never knew myself either. Dorothy's confession shattered the hospital room like a brick through glass. As the heart monitor flatlined and nurses rushed in, Dennis grabbed my shoulder and spun me around. "What did she just say?" His face was red, veins bulging in his neck the way they did when he was drunk and looking for a fight. "Did she just say, 'You're not her son'?" The medical team pushed us into the hallway while they worked on Dorothy, but we all knew she was gone. Marlene stood against the wall, her mouth hanging open, looking at me like she was seeing me for the first time. "She stole you? From a billionaire? What the hell is she talking about?" Dennis shoved me hard against the vending machine. "I knew it. I always knew something was wrong with you. The way you talked, the way you acted, all superior with your numbers and your clean hands. You were never one of us." "Dennis, I didn't know," I said, my mind reeling, trying to process what Dorothy had said. How could I have known? "Sterling Rothwell," Marlene said, already on her phone, typing frantically. "Holy shit, Dennis, look at this. Sterling Rothwell owns half of Manhattan. His company is worth billions. Says here his son was kidnapped in 1985 and never found." She looked up at me, her eyes cold. "That's you. You're the stolen baby." A doctor came out to officially pronounce Dorothy dead, but Dennis and Marlene barely noticed. They were focused on me now, circling like wolves who'd just realized there was prey in their midst. 38 years, Dennis said, his voice getting louder. 38 years of Mom feeding you, clothing you, putting a roof over your head, and you weren't even hers to raise. "She was my mother," I said. "She raised me. I'm still your brother." "Brother?" Marlene laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You're not our anything. You're some rich man's stolen kid. You think you belong here? You think you have any right to anything of ours?" We ended up in the hospital parking lot, Dennis pushing me ahead of him while Marlene followed, still reading from her phone. "It says here Sterling Rothwell never stopped looking. He spent millions trying to find his son. There's a whole foundation dedicated to it." She looked up at me with disgust. "While we were eating mac and cheese 4 nights a week, your real daddy was living in a penthouse." Dennis reached into my jacket and pulled out my wallet. "This money was for Mom's funeral," I said, trying to grab it back. "Mom?" He laughed and pocketed the $300. "She wasn't your mom, remember? Consider this payment for all those years of freeloading." He threw my empty wallet on the ground. "Dennis, Marlene, please, where am I supposed to go?" "Not our problem," Marlene said. She was already on the phone with someone. I heard her say my name, my address, something about fraud. "Yeah, he's been living under false pretenses. The real Nathan Bridgewater probably died years ago. This guy's some kidnapped rich kid." Security arrived before I could respond. Dennis told them I was harassing them, that I had no legal relationship to the deceased. "Check the records," he said. "Dorothy Bridgewater had 2 children, Dennis and Marlene. This man is a stranger who's been perpetrating a fraud." The security guards escorted me out. When I tried to go to my car, Dennis held up my keys. "You've been driving Harold's truck," he said. "Harold Bridgewater was my father, not yours. The truck stays with family. I walked 4 miles to my apartment, my mind churning through every memory, every moment that suddenly made sense, Dorothy's guilty looks, the way she flinched when I excelled at math, how she never wanted to talk about my early childhood, claiming she didn't take many pictures because they couldn't afford film. My landlord was waiting at my door with a locksmith. "Mr. Chen called," he said, not meeting my eyes. Mr. Chen was Dennis and Marlene's cousin, a lawyer who handled small claims. "Says there's a question about your identity. Can't have someone living here under fraudulent pretenses. You got 10 minutes to pack what you can carry." 10 minutes to pack 38 years of a life that was never really mine. I grabbed clothes, my father's watch that wasn't really my father's, a photo of Dorothy that I couldn't bring myself to leave behind despite everything. Dennis had already called my bank, reporting suspicious activity on an account he claimed Dorothy had opened fraudulently in a false name. They froze everything pending investigation. By nightfall, I was standing outside the Burke Lakefront homeless shelter with 2 garbage bags of possessions and no idea who I really was. Nathan Bridgewater was dead, had maybe never existed at all. Christopher Rothwell was a ghost story, a missing child from a world I couldn't even imagine. And I was caught between them, a man without a name, without a family, without a single thing to prove I was anybody at all. 3 months at the Burke Lakefront shelter taught me that rock bottom has a basement, and that basement has a subfloor nobody talks about. I'd gone from warehouse supervisor to day laborer when I could find work, moving furniture for cash, cleaning out foreclosed homes, anything that didn't require documentation. My hands, once soft from office work, became cracked and bloody. I learned which convenience stores threw out food that was still edible, which churches served meals without sermons, which corners to avoid after dark. Thursday afternoon started like any other. I stood in the shelter's food line, holding a plastic tray that had been washed 1,000 times but never quite looked clean. The man ahead of me was arguing about portion sizes. The woman behind me smelled like she'd been self-medicating with cheap vodka. I kept my head down, had learned that invisibility was the best survival strategy. Nathan Bridgewater? 2 men in suits that cost more than I'd made in a month stood beside me. The entire food line turned to stare. Men in $1,000 suits didn't come to the Burke Lakefront shelter unless someone had died or someone was getting arrested. "I'm Roger Blackstone," the older one said, producing a business card that read Private Investigator with a Manhattan address. "This is Anthony Corville, estate attorney. We've been looking for you for 3 months. If this is about Dennis claiming I owe him money, I don't have anything left to take," I said, still holding my tray. "It's about your father," Corville said, "your biological father, Sterling Rothwell." The name hit me like ice water. I set down the tray before I dropped it. "How did you find me?" Blackstone held up a clear evidence bag with a coffee cup inside. "DNA sample from the cup you threw away yesterday at the convenience store on Euclid Avenue. We've been checking shelters, hospitals, churches. Your mother's confession made the local news. Small item buried on page 6, but Sterling has people who watch for any mention of the kidnapping." "Come with us," Corville said. "There's a conference room at the Marriott downtown. We need to talk privately." I looked down at my clothes, stained and reworn too many times. I'm not exactly dressed for the Marriott. "Mr. Rothwell," Blackstone said, and hearing someone call me that name made my chest tight. "You could be wearing a garbage bag, and you'd still be Sterling Rothwell's son." The conference room had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Erie. Corville opened a leather briefcase and spread documents across the polished table. Birth certificates, DNA results, photographs that made my hands shake. A baby with green eyes, the same eyes I saw in the mirror every morning. A young couple holding that baby, the woman with my exact shade of hair, the man with my jawline. "Your father is Sterling Rothwell," Blackstone began, sliding a recent photograph across the table. An elderly man in a hospital bed, but even dying, you could see the power in his face. He owns Rothwell Real Estate Holdings, 43 commercial properties in Manhattan, including 2 entire blocks in Midtown. The portfolio is valued at $2.4 billion. Your mother was Patricia Rothwell, née Morrison, Corville added, showing me another photo. A beautiful woman with green eyes full of life. She died in a car accident in 1988. Your father never remarried, never had other children. He said losing you both broke something in him that couldn't be fixed. Dorothy Bridgewater worked as a housekeeper for the family in 1985, Blackstone continued. She'd been told she couldn't have children after multiple miscarriages. On the night of October 15th, during a charity gala at the estate, she took you from your nursery. She'd been planning it for months, had fake documents prepared, a car ready. She drove straight through to Ohio, to a cousin who helped her create a new identity. Your father never believed you were dead, Corville said. The FBI, the police, everyone else gave up, but Sterling hired private investigators continuously for 38 years. He spent approximately $12 million searching for you. I stared at the documents, each one rewriting my entire existence. Why now? Why could you find me when no one else could? Dorothy's deathbed confession, Blackstone said. One of our people monitors news feeds for keywords related to the case. When Dorothy's name appeared connected to a confession about a stolen baby from 1985, we investigated immediately. Your DNA confirmed what we suspected. Your father is dying, Corville said gently. Liver cancer, stage 4. The doctors give him 2 weeks at most. He wants to see his son before he goes. He wants to correct a 38-year injustice. He pulled out one final document, thick as a phone book. This is his will. You're the sole beneficiary. Everything goes to Christopher Sterling Rothwell III. That's you. I don't know anything about real estate, I said. I supervised a warehouse. I've been homeless for 3 months. You have the wrong person. We have exactly the right person, Blackstone said. But there's something else you need to know about Dorothy Bridgewater. Something we discovered when we investigated her background. Something that explains everything. The private jet touched down at Teterboro Airport just as the sun set over Manhattan. Through the window I could see the city's skyline, those legendary towers of glass and steel that Sterling Rothwell had helped build. Blackstone had bought me a suit from the hotel gift shop. Nothing fancy, but clean and properly fitted. I felt like an imposter wearing it, like a homeless man playing dress-up, which I suppose I was. The penthouse occupied the top 2 floors of a building on Fifth Avenue, overlooking Central Park. The elevator opened directly into the foyer, marble floors reflecting crystal chandeliers. A nurse in pristine scrubs met us at the door. He's been asking for you every hour, she said softly. He's lucid, but we don't know for how long. Sterling Rothwell lay in a hospital bed that had been set up in what was once his study. Through the windows, Manhattan glittered like a constellation he'd pulled down from the sky. He was smaller than I'd expected, cancer having eaten away at what must have once been an imposing frame. But his eyes, when they found mine, were sharp as broken glass. "Christopher," he whispered, and tears ran down his hollowed cheeks. "You have Patricia's eyes. I've seen them in my dreams for 38 years." I approached slowly, unsure whether to take his hand, unsure what to call him. He solved the problem by reaching out, his fingers skeletal but his grip surprisingly firm. "Let me look at you," he said. "My son, my boy. They told me you were dead, but I knew. A father knows." We talked for an hour, Sterling asking questions about my life, wincing when I described the poverty, the struggle, Dennis and Marlene's cruelty. "I failed you," he kept saying. "I was supposed to protect you, and I failed." "You couldn't have known," I said. "Dorothy fooled everyone." Sterling's expression changed then, something shifting in his eyes. "Tell him," he said to Blackstone. "He needs to know everything." Blackstone pulled out a folder he'd been holding back. When we investigated Dorothy's background, we found something unexpected. Dorothy's maiden name wasn't Wilson, as she'd claimed on employment records. It was Rothwell. The room went silent except for the hum of medical equipment. I looked at Sterling, whose face had crumpled with fresh grief. "She was my sister," he said. "My half-sister, actually. My father's shame. Sterling's father, your grandfather, had an affair with a housekeeper in 1955, Blackstone explained. Dorothy was the result. The family paid the woman to disappear, to never contact them again. But Dorothy found out who her father was when her mother died. She came looking for money when she turned 18. Father gave her $50,000 to go away," Sterling continued, his voice bitter. "He made her sign papers saying she'd never contact the family again. But she wanted more than money. She wanted recognition. She wanted to be a Rothwell. So she came back under a false name," Corvell added. "Got hired as a housekeeper using forged references. She worked in your house for 2 years, watching you build your life with Patricia, watching you have what she thought should have been hers." "There's more," Blackstone said, pulling out a leather journal. "We found this in Dorothy's apartment in Cleveland. She kept detailed records." He opened it to a marked page. Dorothy's handwriting was cramped, angry. "Sterling has everything because he was born on the right side of the sheets. His son will inherit billions while my children get nothing. But if I take the boy, raise him as my own, he'll still get everything eventually, just through me. I'll be his mother. I'll be the one he loves. The money will come to my family where it belongs." "She didn't just steal you from a billionaire," Sterling said, gripping my hand tighter. "She stole you from her own brother. She raised my son as her own, watching from afar as I built my empire, knowing that she was keeping my greatest treasure from me." "But Harold," I said, trying to process this. "Dennis and Marlene, were they?" "Harold's from a previous marriage," Blackstone confirmed. "Dorothy couldn't have children, just as she told people. Dennis and Marlene were Harold's kids. She married him partly to have a ready-made family to hide you in." Sterling started coughing then, specks of blood appearing on his lips. The nurse moved forward, but he waved her off. "2 more things," he gasped. "First, I've already signed everything over to you. As of this moment, you're worth $2.4 billion. Corvell has all the papers. Second," he pulled me close enough that I could smell the medicine and mortality on him. "Dorothy wrote something else in that journal. She said there were others, other housekeepers, other stolen children. She was part of something bigger. Find them, Christopher. Find them and bring them home." He died 2 weeks later, holding my hand, whispering my mother Patricia's name. At his funeral, attended by New York's elite, Dennis and Marlene appeared in ill-fitting formal wear. "Brother," Dennis tried, approaching me at the reception. "We were emotional. Mom's death, it was shocking." My security team moved to intercept them, but I held up a hand. "I'm not your brother," I said simply. "I never was. Dorothy made sure of that." "You can't just leave us with nothing," Marlene said, her voice taking on a wheedling tone. "We raised you. We're family." "You threw me out of a hospital and left me homeless," I reminded them. "You took my last $300 and called me a bastard. Good riddance, I believe you said." 6 months later, I stood in the office that had once been Sterling's, looking out at the Manhattan skyline as snow began to fall. The city that had once seemed like another planet now bore my name on 3 buildings. The leather chair still smelled like his cologne, and sometimes I caught myself turning to ask him a question before remembering he was gone. The first thing I did with the money was write 2 checks for $50,000 each, one to Dennis, one to Marlene. My lawyers thought I was insane. "They have no legal claim," Corvell reminded me. "They treated you terribly." "It's not about them," I said, signing the checks. "It's about me deciding who I want to be." Dennis cashed his immediately, probably before the ink was dry. Marlene sent hers back, torn into confetti-sized pieces with a note that said, "I hope you choke on your billions." I had my assistant frame it. It hangs in my private bathroom, a daily reminder that money doesn't cure hatred, it just amplifies what was already there. The Burke Lakefront Shelter received an anonymous donation of $10 million on a Thursday afternoon, exactly 6 months after 2 men in suits had found me in their food line. I delivered it personally, wearing the same clothes I'd worn as a resident. Mrs. Holstead, the director who'd given me extra blankets on cold nights, recognized me immediately. "Nathan?" she said, then caught herself. "I'm sorry, I heard about everything. Christopher, right?" "Nathan's fine," I said. "Nathan was the man you helped when he had nothing. Christopher's just who signs the checks." She broke down, crying when she saw the amount. "This will keep us running for 20 years, she said. "We can expand, add mental health services, job training programs." "Good," I said, "because I'm going to need your help with something bigger." The Patricia Rothwell Foundation launched 3 months later with a $100 million endowment. Our mission was simple but overwhelming. Find the other stolen children Dorothy's journals had hinted at. Blackstone, who I'd hired as the foundation's director, had already uncovered a pattern. Between 1980 and 1990, 17 wealthy families reported kidnapped infants who were never found, he reported at our first board meeting. In 12 of those cases, a housekeeper or nanny had recently quit or disappeared. Dorothy's journals mention 3 other women by first name only: Linda, Susan, and Marie. We believe they were working together. We found the first one 8 months later. A woman in Detroit named Michael Thompson discovered he was actually Michael Pearson, heir to a pharmaceutical fortune. His mother, Linda, had died 5 years earlier, taking the secret to her grave. We reunited him with his biological father, who'd spent 35 years believing his son had drowned in a kidnapping gone wrong. The second discovery was harder. Susan had raised her daughter, Jennifer, in poverty in rural Kentucky, while Jennifer's biological parents searched the world for her. The reunion was on every news channel, Jennifer embracing parents she'd never known existed while grappling with a lifetime of lies. But it was the third case that broke me. Marie hadn't just stolen a baby. She'd taken twins, separating them, selling one to a desperate couple in Canada while raising the other as her own in Phoenix. Those twins were 29 when we found them. They'd lived their entire lives 300 miles apart, each feeling like something was missing, neither knowing they had a twin searching for the same answers. Dennis tried suing me 14 months after Sterling's death, claiming emotional damages and seeking $50 million for pain and suffering caused by Dorothy's deception. The case was thrown out in minutes. He sent letters, after that, alternating between threats and begging, until Corvell got a restraining order. Marlene simply vanished, though I heard she'd married someone in Florida and told everyone her brother was dead. I kept Dorothy's photo, the one I'd grabbed from my apartment that terrible day, not out of love or nostalgia, but as a reminder. She'd stolen me from my family, denied Sterling the chance to raise his son, denied me the chance to know my mother before she died. But she'd also taught me something valuable, even if she never meant to. In trying to steal wealth for herself, Dorothy had ensured I grew up understanding what it meant to have nothing. Every decision I make now, every donation, every investment in finding stolen children, comes from knowing both sides of the mirror. I've been homeless and billionaire, nobody and somebody, Nathan Bridgewater and Christopher Rothwell. Standing in that penthouse office, snow falling on the city Sterling built and I inherited, I realized the truth Dorothy never understood. Family isn't about blood or money or the name on your birth certificate. It's about choosing to love when it would be easier to hate, choosing to build when it would be easier to tear down, choosing to search for truth even when lies are more comfortable. The Rothwell Foundation has found 43 stolen children so far. Some reunions are joyful, others complicated, all of them necessary. Each one is a small correction to a massive injustice, a family rebuilt from the ashes of someone's greed. Sterling searched for me for 38 years and found me just in time to say goodbye. Now I search for others, hoping they get more time than we did. Sometimes I dream about Dorothy, and in those dreams I ask her if it was worth it. Did stealing me bring her the satisfaction she craved? Did raising her brother's son as her own fill the hole where recognition should have been? She never answers in the dreams, just stares at me with those guilty eyes I now understand were seeing not her stolen son, but her brother's face looking back at her, a daily reminder of what she'd done. The 7 words that changed everything still echo in my mind. Dorothy Bridgewater was Sterling's biological sister. 7 words that explained a lifetime of lies, that revealed how greed can corrupt even family bonds, that proved blood alone doesn't make you family, but it can make you a monster. My name is Christopher Sterling Rothwell III, and I was stolen as a baby by my aunt, raised in poverty while my father searched the world for me, and found just in time to watch him die. But I'm also Nathan Bridgewater, the warehouse worker who held his dying mother's hand, even as she confessed to destroying multiple lives. I'm both and neither, rich and poor, found, and forever a little bit lost. The money Sterling left me isn't really mine. It belongs to every stolen child still out there, every family broken by greed, every parent who never stopped searching. I'm just the guardian of resources that can bring people home. Dorothy stole me to claim a fortune that was never hers. Now I use that fortune to undo crimes like hers, one recovered child at a time. And somewhere, maybe, that makes the 38 stolen years mean something after all. If this story touched your heart or reminded you that family isn't always what it seems, please take a moment to like this video. Share it with someone who needs to hear that sometimes the most painful truths lead to the most powerful transformations. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more incredible true stories that prove life is stranger and more powerful than any fiction we could imagine. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a story that might just change the way you see the world. Thank you for watching. And remember, sometimes the family that searches for you for decades is worth more than the family that raised you with lies.